Land of Windy Poplars, Chapter 2, Part 2. I'm going home next Friday evening to spend 2 beautiful days in Avonlea. The only drawback will be that everybody will ask me how I like teaching in Summerside. But think of Green Gables now, Gilbert. The lake of shining waters with a blue mist on it, the maples across the brook beginning to turn scarlet, the ferns golden brown in the haunted wood, and the sunset shadows in Lover's Lane. Darling spot! I find it in my heart to wish I were there now with... well, guess whom? Do you know, Gilbert, there are times when I strongly suspect that I love you. Windy Poplars, Spooks Lane, South Side, October 10th. Honored and respected Sir. That is how a love letter of Aunt Chatty's grandmother began. Isn't it delicious? What a thrill of superiority it must have given the grandfather. Wouldn't you really prefer it to Gilbert, darling, etc.? But on the whole, I think I'm glad you're not the grandfather or a grandfather. It's wonderful to think we're young and have our whole lives before us. Together, isn't it? Several pages omitted, Anne's pen being evidently neither sharp, stub, nor rusty. I'm sitting in the window seat in the tower, looking out into the trees, waving against an amber sky, beyond them to the harbor. Last night I had such a lovely walk with myself. I really had to go somewhere, for it was just a trifle dismal at Windy Poplars. Aunt Chatty was crying in the sitting room because her feelings had been hurt, and Aunt Kate was crying in her bedroom because it was the anniversary of Captain Amace's death, and Rebecca Dew was crying in the kitchen for no reason that I could discover. I've never seen Rebecca Dew cry before, but when I tried tactfully to find out what was wrong, she pettishly wanted to know if a body couldn't enjoy a cry when she felt like it. So I folded my tent and stole away, leaving her to her enjoyment. I went out and down the harbor road. There was such a nice frosty Octobery smell in the air, blent with the delightful odor of newly plowed fields. I walked on until twilight had deepened into a moonlit autumn night. I was alone, but not lonely. I held a series of imaginary conversations with imaginary comrades, and thought out so many epigrams that I was agreeably surprised at myself. I couldn't help enjoying myself in spite of my Pringle worries. The spirit moves me to utter a few yowls regarding the Pringles. I hate to admit it, but things are not going any too well in Summerside High. There is no doubt that a cabal has been organized against me. For one thing, homework is never done by any of the Pringles or half-Pringles, and there is no use in appealing to the parents. They are suave, polite, evasive. I know all the pupils who are not Pringles like me, but the Pringle virus of disobedience is undermining the morale of the whole room. One morning I found my desk turned inside out and upside down. Nobody knew who did it, of course, and no one could or would tell who left on it another day the box out of which popped an artificial snake when I opened it. But every Pringle in the school screamed with laughter over my face. I suppose I did look wildly startled. Jen Pringle comes late for school half the time, always with some perfectly watertight excuse, delivered politely, with an insolent tilt to her mouth. She passes notes in class under my very nose. I found a peeled onion in the pocket of my coat when I put it on today. I should love to lock that girl up on bread and water until she learned how to behave herself. The worst thing to date was the caricature of myself found on the blackboard one morning, done in white chalk with scarlet hair. Everybody denied doing it, Jen among the rest. I knew Jen was the only pupil in the room who could draw like that. It was done well. My nose, which, as you know, has always been my one pride and joy, was humpbacked, and my mouth was the mouth of a vinegary spinster who had been teaching a school full of Pringles for 30 years. But it was me. I woke up at 3 o'clock that night and writhed over the recollection. Isn't it queer that the things we writhe over at night are seldom wicked things, just humiliating ones? All sorts of things are being said. I'm accused of marking down Hattie Pringle's examination papers just because she's a Pringle. I am said to laugh when the children make mistakes. Well, I did laugh when Fred Pringle defined a centurion as a man who had lived 100 years. I couldn't help it. James is saying there is no discipline in the school, no discipline whatever. And a report is being circulated that I'm a foundling. I'm beginning to encounter the Pringle antagonism in other quarters, socially as well as educationally. Summerside seems to be under the Pringle thumb. No wonder they're called the royal family. I wasn't invited to Alice Pringle's walking party last Friday, and when Mrs. Frank Pringle got up a tea in aid of a church project, Rebecca Dew informs me that the ladies are going to build the new spire. I was the only girl in the Presbyterian church who was not asked to take a table. I have heard that the minister's wife, who is a newcomer in Summerside, suggested asking me to sing in the choir, and was informed that all of the Pringles would drop out of it if she did, and that would leave such a skeleton that the choir simply couldn't carry on. Of course, I'm not the only one of the teachers who has troubles with pupils. When the other teachers send theirs up to me to be disciplined, how I hate that word, half of them are Pringles. But there is never any complaint made about them. 2 evenings ago, I kept Jen in after school to do some work she had deliberately left undone. 10 minutes later, the carriage from Maplehurst drew up before the schoolhouse, and Miss Ellen was at the door. A beautifully dressed, sweetly smiling old lady with elegant black lace mitts and a fine hawk-like nose, looking as if she had just stepped out of an 1840 bandbox. She was so sorry, but could she have Jen? She was going to visit friends in Lowvale and had promised to take Jen. Jen went off triumphantly, and I realized afresh the forces arrayed against me. In my pessimistic moods, I think the Pringles are a compound of Sloans and pies. But I know they're not. I feel that I could like them if they were not my enemies. They are, for the most part, a frank, jolly, loyal set. I could even like Miss Ellen. I've never seen Miss Sarah. Miss Sarah has not left Maplehurst for 10 years. Too delicate, or thinks she is, says Rebecca Dew with a sniff. But there ain't anything the matter with her pride. All the Pringles are proud, but those 2 old girls pass everything. You should hear them talk about their ancestors. Well, their old father, Captain Abraham Pringle, was a fine old fellow. His brother Myron wasn't quite so fine, but you don't hear the Pringles talking much about him. But I'm desperate afraid you're going to have a hard time with them all. When they make up their mind about anything or anybody, they've never been known to change it. But keep your chin up, Miss Shirley. Keep your chin up. I wish I could get Miss Ellen's recipe for pound cakes, sighed Aunt Chatty. She's promised it to me time and again, but it never comes. It's an old English family recipe. They're so exclusive about their recipes. In wild, fantastic dreams, I see myself compelling Miss Ellen to hand that recipe over to Aunt Chatty on bended knee and make Jen mind her P's and Q's. The maddening thing is that I could easily make Jen do it myself if her whole clan weren't backing her up in her deviltry. 2 pages omitted. Your obedient servant, Anne Shirley. P.S. That was how Aunt Chatty's grandmother signed her love letters. October 15th. We heard today that there had been a burglary at the other end of town last night. A house was entered and some money and a dozen silver spoons stolen. So Rebecca Dew has gone up to Mr. Hamilton's to see if she can borrow a dog. She will tie him on the back veranda, and she advises me to lock up my engagement ring. By the way, I found out why Rebecca Dew cried. It seems there had been a domestic convulsion. Dusty Miller had misbehaved again, and Rebecca Dew told Aunt Kate she would really have to do something about that cat. He was wearing her to a fiddle string. It was the 3rd time in a year, and she knew he did it on purpose. And Aunt Kate said that if Rebecca Dew would always let the cat out when he meowed, there would be no danger of his misbehaving. Well, this is the last straw, said Rebecca Dew. Consequently, tears. The Pringle situation grows a little more acute every week. Something very impertinent was written across one of my books yesterday, and Homer Pringle turned handsprings all the way down the aisle when leaving school. Also, I got an anonymous letter recently full of nasty innuendos. Somehow, I don't blame Jen for either the book or the letter. Imp that she is, there are things that she wouldn't stoop to. Rebecca Dew is furious, and I shudder to think what she would do to the Pringles if she had them in her power. Nero's wish isn't to be compared to it. I really don't blame her, for there are times when I feel myself that I could cheerfully hand any and all of the Pringles a poisoned filter of Borgia brewing. I don't think I've told you much about the other teachers. There are two, you know, the Vice Principal Catherine Brooke of the junior room and George McKay of the prep. Of George I have little to say. He is a shy, good-natured lad of 20, with a slight, delicious Highland accent suggestive of low ceilings and misty islands. His grandfather was Isle of Skye, and does very well with the preps. So far as I know, I like him, but I'm afraid I'm going to have a hard time liking Catherine Brooke. Catherine is a girl of, I think, about 28, though she looks 35. I have been told she cherished hopes of promotion to the principalship, and I suppose she resents my getting it, especially when I'm considerably her junior. She's a good teacher, a bit of a martinet, but she is not popular with anyone, and doesn't worry over it. She doesn't seem to have any friends or relations, and boards in a gloomy-looking house on grubby little Temple Street. She dresses very dowdily, she never goes out socially, and is said to be mean. She is very sarcastic, and her pupils dread her biting remarks. I am told that her way of raising her thick black eyebrows and drawling at them reduces them to a pulp. I wish I could work it on the Pringles. But I really shouldn't like to govern by fear as she does. I want my pupils to love me. In spite of the fact that she has apparently no trouble in making them toe the line, she is constantly sending some of them to me, especially Pringles. I know she does it purposely, and I feel miserably certain that she exults in my difficulties and would be glad to see me worsted. Rebecca Dew says that no one can make friends with her. The widows have invited her several times to Sunday supper. The dear souls are always doing that for lonely people, and always have the most delicious chicken salad for them. But she never came. So they have given it up because Aunt Kate says there are limits. There are rumors that she is very clever and can sing and recite elocute a la Rebecca Dew, but will not do either. Aunt Chatty once asked her to recite at a church supper. We thought she refused very ungraciously, said Aunt Kate. Just growled, said Rebecca Dew. Catherine has a deep, throaty voice, almost a man's voice, and it does sound like a growl when she isn't in good humor. She isn't pretty, but she might make more of herself. She's dark and swarthy, with magnificent black hair, always dragged back from her high forehead and coiled in a clumsy knot at the base of her neck. Her eyes don't match her hair, being a clear light amber under her black brows. She has ears she needn't be ashamed of to show, and the most beautiful hands I have ever seen. Also, she has a well-cut mouth, but she dresses terribly. Seems to have a positive genius for getting the colors and lines she should not wear. Dull dark greens and drab grays, when she is too sallow for greens and grays, and stripes which make her tall, lean figure even taller and leaner. And her clothes always look as she slept in them. Her manner is very repellent. As Rebecca Dew would say, she always has a chip on her shoulder. Every time I pass her on the stairs, I feel that she is thinking horrid things about me. Every time I speak to her, she makes me feel I've said the wrong thing, and yet I'm very sorry for her, though I know she would resent my pity furiously, and I can't do anything to help her because she doesn't want to be helped. She really is hateful to me. One day, when we 3 teachers were all in the staff room, I did something which, it seems, transgressed one of the unwritten laws of the school, and Catherine said cuttingly, "Perhaps you think you are above the rules, Miss Shirley." At another time, when I was suggesting some changes which I thought would be good for the school, she said with a scornful smile, "I'm not interested in fairy tales." Once, when I said some nice things about her work and methods, she said, "And what is to be the pill in all this jam?" But the thing that annoyed me most, well, one day, when I happened to pick up a book of hers in the staff room and glanced at the flyleaf, I said, I'm glad you spell your name with a K. Catherine is so much more alluring than Catherine, just as K is ever so much more a gypsier letter than smug C. She made no response, but the next note she sent up was signed Catherine Brooke with a C. I sneezed all the way home. I really would give up trying to be friends with her if I hadn't a queer, unaccountable feeling that under all her briskness and aloofness, she's actually starved for companionship. Altogether, what with Catherine's antagonism and the Pringle attitude, I don't know just what I'd do if it wasn't for dear Rebecca Dew and your letters. And little Elizabeth. Because I've got acquainted with little Elizabeth, and she's a darling. 3 nights ago, I took the glass of milk to the wall door, and little Elizabeth herself was there to get it instead of the woman. Her head just coming above the solid part of the door, so that her face was framed in the ivy. She is small, pale, golden, and wistful. Her eyes, looking at me through the autumn twilight, are large and golden hazel. Her silver golden hair was parted in the middle, sleekly, plainly down over her head with a circular comb, and held in waves on her shoulders. She wore a pale blue gingham dress, and the expression of a princess of Elfland. She had what Rebecca Dew calls a delicate air, and gave me the impression of a child who was more or less undernourished, not in body but in soul, more of a moonbeam than a sunbeam. "And this is Elizabeth," I said. "Not tonight," she answered gravely. "This is my night for being Betty, because I love everything in the world tonight. It was Elizabeth last night, and tomorrow night I'll probably be Beth. It all depends on how I feel." There was a touch of the kindred spirit for you. I thrilled to it at once. "How very nice to have a name you can change so easily and still feel it's your own." Little Elizabeth nodded. "I can make so many names out of it. Elsie and Betty and Bess and Elisa and Lizbeth and Beth, but not Lizzie. I never can feel like Lizzie." "Who could?" I said. "Do you think it's silly of me, Miss Shirley? Grandmother and the woman do." "Not silly at all. Very wise and very delightful," I said. Little Elizabeth made saucer eyes at me over the rim of her glass. I felt that I was being weighed in some secret spiritual balance, and presently I realized thankfully that I had not been found wanting. For little Elizabeth asked a favor of me, and little Elizabeth does not ask favors of people she does not like. "Would you mind lifting up the cat and letting me pat him?" she asked shyly. Dusty Miller was rubbing against my legs. I lifted him, and little Elizabeth put out a tiny hand and stroked his head delightedly. "I like kittens better than babies," she said, looking at me with an odd little air of defiance, as if she knew I would be shocked, but tell the truth she must. "I suppose you've never had much to do with babies, so you don't know how sweet they are," I said, smiling. "Have you a kitten of your own?" She shook her head. "Oh, no. Grandmother doesn't like cats, and the woman hates them. The woman is out tonight, so that is why I could come for the milk. I love coming for the milk, because Rebecca Dew is such an agreeable person." "Are you sorry she didn't come tonight?" I laughed. Little Elizabeth shook her head. "No, you're very agreeable, too. I've been wanting to get acquainted with you, but I was afraid it mightn't happen before tomorrow comes." We stood there and talked while Elizabeth sipped her milk daintily, and she told me all about tomorrow. The woman had told her that tomorrow never comes, but Elizabeth knows better. It will come sometime. Some beautiful morning she will just wake up and find it is tomorrow. Not today, but tomorrow. And then things will happen, wonderful things. She may even have a day to do exactly as she likes in, with nobody watching her, though I think Elizabeth feels that is too good to happen even in tomorrow. Or she may find out what it is at the end of the harbor road, that wandering, twisting road like a nice red snake that leads, so Elizabeth thinks, to the end of the world. Perhaps the island of happiness is there. Elizabeth feels sure there is an island of happiness somewhere where all the ships that would never come back are anchored, and she will find it when tomorrow comes. And when tomorrow comes, said Elizabeth, I will have 1,000,000 dogs and 45 cats. I told grandmother that when she wouldn't let me have a kitten, Miss Shirley, and she was angry and said, I'm not accustomed to be spoken to like that, Miss Impertinence. I was sent to bed without supper. But I didn't mean to be impertinent, and I couldn't sleep, Miss Shirley, because the woman told me that she knew a child once that had died in her sleep after being impertinent. When Elizabeth had finished her milk, there came a sharp tapping at some unseen window behind the spruces. I think we had been watched all the time. My elf maiden ran, her golden head glimmering along the dark spruce aisle until she vanished. She's a fanciful little creature, said Rebecca Dew when I told her of my adventure. Really, it somehow had the quality of an adventure, Gilbert. One day she said to me, Are you scared of lions, Rebecca Dew? I never met any, so I can't tell you, says I. There will be any amount of lions in tomorrow, says she, but they will be nice friendly lions. Child, you'll turn into eyes if you look like that, says I. She was looking clean through me at something she saw in that tomorrow of hers. I'm thinking my deepest thoughts, Rebecca Dew, she says. The trouble with that child is she doesn't laugh enough. I remembered that Elizabeth had never laughed once during our talk. I feel that she hasn't learned how. The great house is so still and lonely and laughterless. It looks dull and gloomy, even now when the world is a riot of autumn color. Little Elizabeth is doing too much listening to lost whispers. I think one of my missions in Summerside will be to teach her how to laugh. Your tenderest, most faithful friend, Anne Shirley. P.S. More of Aunt Chatty's grandmother.